Hello everyone, I'm Katie Watson and I'll be your host today representing CCON. If this is one of your first times joining our webinar series, I'll just give you a quick overview of who we are. CCON is a cybersecurity partner committed to empowering organizations to take control of their security challenges with confidence. And we believe that security culture isn't built through fear or compliance checklists. It's about empowering your people to become a strong first line of defense. And that is actually what today's session is all about. It's about how to build a resilient security culture that fosters real behavioral change. And we are so lucky and so excited to have one of the experts with us. Maxime Cartier, who is an expert in security awareness and behavior design. With almost a decade of experience, Maxime has helped global organizations transform security awareness into a people-centric, risk-reducing strategy. And he is the former head of security and culture at quite a well-known company called the H&M Group, which I'm sure many of you know. So today, Maxime will walk us through a three-step framework to help organizations turn employees into their best defenses with practical real-world strategies that deliver measurable results. So before we get started, just some housekeeping. So this webinar is going to be around about 45 minutes, including some time for a Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions or you think of anything after the webinar that you want to get in touch, you can send us an email. But yeah, if you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A box. The webinar itself is being recorded and the recording will be sent to you after the webinar. And any feedback is really appreciated. So if you have any thoughts on the webinar or any other topics you'd like us to cover, please do send me an email at katie.watson@cconcyber.com. So now, without further ado, grab a coffee, settle in, and I'm going to hand you over to Maxime, who will go through how you can drive your cybersecurity culture. Thanks, Maxime. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Katie. I'm really excited to be here, and thanks everyone also for joining today. And hope that you will learn something valuable that you can take back to your organizations. And as Katie said, we're going to talk today about how to build a resilient security culture in an organization with a three-step framework to turn employees into our best defense. And the reason we talk about this is simply because the human element is part of so many breaches today, and I feel that it's been kind of left behind. I've been working for close to 10 years now, as Katie said, at the intersection between cybersecurity and people, leading behavior and culture change programs for global companies in manufacturing, aerospace, retail at the H&M Group. But today I'm the head of human risk or human risk management at Hoxhunt. And Hoxhunt is a company that provides a behavior and culture change platform for close to 3 million people globally nowadays, and I help them to build the future of the product. During this session, for the next 30 minutes approximately, we'll be covering the following agenda. And first, we'll discuss why is the human element important in cybersecurity and why the traditional approach of security awareness falls short. Then we'll define what human risk management is and look into its 3 steps to provide a significant risk reduction and culture change. And finally, if we have any time left, we'll also look into a retail case study because I feel like this is an industry that has its specific challenges and as a way to try to apply this framework into retail. So let's get started. And first, I always like to start with this figure. 68% of cybersecurity breaches today involve the human element. It's a number that comes from the Verizon Data Breach Investigation report that analyzed last year more than 10,000 confirmed breaches last year. It's quite a trusted report where they look at all these breaches, they analyze them to try to understand where did they start from. And so in the huge majority of cases, what they find is that actually the breach started with a human element. And that can be, number one, social engineering. So everything linked to phishing and phishing through all these different forms. So it can be email, but it can be also WhatsApp or phone calls or SMSs, QR codes, etc. That's still one of the major threats that organizations are facing. The second one is passwords. So reuse passwords. Passwords are simple and easy to guess. These credentials are stolen or guessed in some way. Sometimes it's also through social engineering. Sometimes maybe through some other ways. But that's another big source of incidents. And the last one are simply accidents, mistakes done with the handling of data. So the way we store and we share information, it could be a SharePoint folder that is mistakenly open to the whole company, or simply sending the wrong email to the wrong person. So these are very common, and unfortunately what we see, I mean, the Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report has existed for quite some time, but from year to year, this figure stays kind of the same. And I think one of the main reasons is because we haven't really changed the way we're addressing this topic. Security awareness is not a new thing, right? This is what we do nowadays when we want to address these breaches. Well, most companies, they do compliance learning. It's a requirement in a lot of frameworks, in a lot of standards, in a lot of regulations that we must train our people or our employees at least annually. And that is translated into this long, sometimes a bit boring compliance learning that everyone needs to complete every year to learn about security. Kind of a check the box exercise to be compliant with standards and regulation, and also perhaps a way for security teams to say, okay, now we've told people what to do. So if anything happens, it's not our fault anymore. And put the responsibility for any successful breaches on someone else. The thing is, giving information once a year about security to people with not the main job is not enough to create new habits. People might forget, or even if they don't forget, even if they know perfectly what they should do, they might simply not want to do it, not be interested in it. Let me give you an example. Everyone knows that eating broccoli is good for your health. I think in the past years, it's been deemed like a superfood. Right? So people know that they should eat their greens. They should eat broccoli, maybe not every day, but at least every week have some broccoli. But if I'm completely honest, I'm not doing that myself. I just don't like broccoli. So I'm not eating it every day or every week. I'm eating it from time to time, but I'm not very good at it. And the same thing happens in cybersecurity. It's the same with passwords. Everyone knows that having a robust password is important nowadays. If you ask people, they will tell you, yes, I know I should have a robust password, a complex, long, special characters, whatever you want. But very few people are actually putting in the effort when they just want to buy a new pair of shoes on this online website and they need to create an account for it and set a password, and they just want the shoes. They don't want to set a complex password. So information alone does not create a behavior. And there's actually decades of research in behavioral economics, in health, that shows that. And that's assuming that people have even watched the e-learning and are aware about what they should do. They paid attention to it. But, most likely a lot of them, they press play in the beginning of the e-learning, and then they went to make themselves a sandwich. Or, pet the dog or use the time to book their next appointment to the hairdresser and let it run in the background. And research shows that less than 15% of people who complete security awareness training go on to actually change their behavior. Less than 15%. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't do compliance, that you shouldn't have any kind of training or e-learning. Compliance is important. It's your ticket to play, right? You need to have that box ticked to be able to operate, to be able to do business. So it's needed, but it's just not enough. And I've been talking here about security awareness training, but what about phishing simulations? In their traditional form, they too can fall short. The traditional industry approach to managing phishing is to send quarterly phishing simulations to everyone in the company, right? But sending the same simulation to everyone can frustrate many if the simulations are too easy or too difficult. Right? If it's too easy, you're frustrated, you want something more challenging. If it's too difficult, you're frustrated because you feel tricked by the security team. Not everyone has the same skills today. So we need to have simulations that are at the right level. Second, they're often not run often enough. A quarterly frequency for simulation gives 3 months for people to just forget completely about phishing. And I've yet to see evidence that sending phishing simulations every quarter change behaviors. And finally, the traditional approach on phishing often focuses too much on failure and punishment. And focusing on failure leads to failure. It creates a psychological unsafe environment where people are afraid to click, afraid to make a mistake, afraid to report an incident if anything happens. So how do we go beyond compliance, beyond traditional security awareness and training and traditional phishing simulations? Well, first, we should think not only in terms of awareness, but in terms of behavior and culture change. About how we can actually create behaviors or change behaviors and create a positive culture of security. Not only train, not only give information, but actually change the behaviors, actually create a positive culture around security. And that's a concept that is pushed very much by Gartner. And you can see here on the slide that they even set it as a top priority for CISOs in 2025. Another term that is used commonly by analysts nowadays is human risk management. And you can see a report from Forrester now on the slide of the human risk management solutions. So they go even beyond security, behavior, and culture, and they call organizations to work towards reducing the human risk. So what does human risk management means? What is it? Human risk management is a process, a framework to finally solve this challenge. It's the process of identifying, evaluating, and addressing the cybersecurity risks that are associated with people. So what's important there is that it's a process, it's a framework. It's not just one activity. You know, it's not only learning, it's not an event, it's not a communication campaign, but it's a process where we identify and evaluate the risks and address them. And we can typically recognize these programs in the way that they understand the risks that they want to address, in the way they use science to change behavior and culture, in the ways they always put the human at the center, showing empathy, creating psychological safety, and in how they measure their impact in terms of risk reduction. And human risk management is not replacing security awareness per se, right? Instead, human risk management is an extension of it, an expansion, but more importantly, as I said, a framework focused on outcomes rather than on activities. So at a high level, let's look at it. How do we do human risk management? So it starts by identifying, evaluating, and prioritizing your human risks. What are the most important human risks in your organization, in your environment? And can we measure a baseline for them? And once we've done that, we've identified this risk, we have an idea of, we have started to quantify them. We can design and deploy interventions that aim at reducing these most important risks. And these interventions, they might include, or they will include most likely, security awareness and training. They can be a lot more. Just a few examples. And interventions could be deploying a new security tool to make the adoption of a certain behavior easier, like deploying a password manager to make it easier for your employees to use complex and unique passwords. It could be also reviewing your processes and policies to make sure that they're simple, that they're understandable, that they're not cumbersome. Just make it easy for people to follow them. For example, the process to report security incidents. Is it just calling a number that everyone knows, calling the help desk, or do they have to fill a form with 10 mandatory fields to report an incident? And last example, it could also be nudges such as coaching messages that are integrated in the interface of your existing tools but helping people doing the right thing right at the moment when they're facing a risk. And all these interventions, they must aim at changing attitudes and behaviors, and the impact of these interventions need to be measured. And that's the last step. That way you can, well, see if what you're doing is working, prove your impact, or reprioritize your risks and adapt your interventions. So all to get started, that's high level. Let's look a little bit deeper into each of these steps. The first step, identifying and evaluate human risks. Why do we start there? Because security teams are often under-resourced and awareness is typically an under-invested area. I know in most organizations, there's the person that is responsible for awareness is also doing other things, or it's just one person for a large company. And there are more than 50 behaviors that you would like your organization to adopt, maybe even 100 behaviors. So you cannot do all these behaviors at the same time. You need to choose what's the most important. And if your organization is large and global with people in different countries, different departments, it becomes hard to address everyone also at the same time. Colleagues working in very different business areas, whether they're blue collars or white collars, working in the stores, in the offices, in the warehouses, have very different risk profiles. It's not only your time, it's the time of the organization also. They have a limited time to spend on security training. Business comes first. So you need to prioritize. You need to get in this step clear priorities to focus your and other people's efforts to. So ask yourself, in my organization, what are the human risks I'm the most concerned of? Where do the biggest vulnerabilities lie? And you can work on this with the rest of the security team. You can ask the SOC to look at the incidents that are actually happening in the company. You can look at the reports like the Verizon Data Breach Investigation report to see what's the status of the threat landscape, to try to prioritize your risk and see, do we want to focus on social engineering or on information storing and sharing, on passwords and accesses, or on the use of Gen AI tools, for example. And not only that, but you can use all these reports, the insights from your SOC and from your team, but try also to measure them. Not easy for every behavior, but try to measure these behaviors when you can. If you see that this is one of my top risks, are there any ways that I can measure this risk? So you can measure behaviors through social engineering, for example, with phishing simulations, of course, but also looking at other security tools that you might have in your tool stack, whether it's Defender or your CASB or an EDR, and find out more about what's actually happening. You can measure knowledge, also another important element, with quizzes, and attitudes, so the soft part of culture, what people feel and think about security, with surveys and focus groups. And another way in which this is interesting is that you can not only prioritize by topic, but you can also try to prioritize by group of users and see in which parts of my organization do we have the biggest gaps? In which country, in which department, which function, which job role? And here on this image, you can see that, for example, in this example company, in the United States, the scores are much lower than in most countries. So it's a good opportunity to try to understand, okay, why are the scores lower? And should we do something specific to them instead of trying to reach everyone? So again, a way to prioritize. We cannot do everything, so let's prioritize and fix what we can measure. The second step is to deploy and design interventions. All your interventions must aim at changing these attitudes, these behaviors, and reduce the risks that you've just identified. And one key learning here that I want to share is that one-size-fits-all approaches rarely work. Let me explain instead the approach that Hoxhunt has pioneered and how we cracked behavior change at scale. What we do is individualize interventions first. So instead of sending a training or a phishing simulation or any type of intervention to everyone, we look at every single employee individually. And they receive training, they receive phishing simulations customized, made just for them. Each phishing simulation, for example, is selected and adapted by AI for each employee based on where the employee is working from, their role, their department, their country. And the AI engine will also progressively increase the difficulty of the simulation based on the individual performance. So if someone clicked or reported their previous simulation, if they clicked, the next one that they will get will be maybe a little bit easier or at the same level so that they can progress. But if they report, then the next one will get more difficult, again, so that they can progress and get prepared against the most advanced attacks. And that's really important to get people engaged and find this as a relevant training to them. The second aspect is a positive and rewarding approach. We want to make sure that when people are doing the right thing, they get rewarded for it. And then they find that the whole security team and their initiatives have a positive approach and a positive impact on the company. So this means that when people report their phishing simulation, they will get stars, they will get a thank you, they will get an achievement, a badge, and same for other behaviors that we detect in the environment. Also, the micro trainings or the training needs to be short and delivered in a way that don't disturb the flow of work. If it's a 45-minute learning, it's never going to be a positive approach or positive experience. We need to make something that is really short and that fits into the flow of work. And finally, the only way to do this at scale is to automate it. Not only actually to deploy it at scale, but also to make sure that this is continuous. Because again, doing something once a year, once a quarter is not enough. We need to have training deployed much more often, at the very least every month, maybe even every other week, so that people can keep security and good habits top of mind. And here I added just some screenshots of the positive and rewarding approach on this slide. And you can see that, yes, employees receive stars when they report phishing simulations, and badges and achievements at different stages of their learning journey. And there's even a leaderboard, and people are able to compete against their colleagues. And the reason I know a lot about this is not just because I work for Hoxhunt now, but because in my previous role, I also identified phishing as one of our biggest risks in the initial stage. And I looked at several solutions, and I decided to try with Hoxhunt for the reasons that I explained just before. So we deployed Hoxhunt. It took about 4 weeks. And as an experiment, I decided that it would be an opt-in program, that employees could decide to join voluntarily or not and stay out of it and not receive the training. And we ran this experiment for quite a long time, actually, for 9 months. With some people decided that, yes, they wanted to train. Some people saying, no, I'm not interested. And then I sent the same phishing simulation to everyone in the company. And by the way, we had actually like 25% of people who said that, yes, they wanted to receive the training. So not too bad as something voluntary. But so then I sent the same phishing simulation to everyone in the company, to the 25% of people who had been enrolled in the training, and in a sense to our control group, to the people who were not part of the training. And when the results of the test came in, I couldn't really hold my excitement. Those trained were 6 times less likely to click on the phishing email that we sent, and 7 times more likely to report it. And the last one, I think, is even more interesting because it shows a real change of culture. And I brought these results to my management, and a couple of months later, I found myself actually sitting in front of the whole C-suite sharing the same. And it turns out that when you present evidence through data of a risk and that you've significantly reduced that risk, you will get a ton of executive support, which will help you tremendously to strengthen your security program. And these results are not unique. We see actually with all of our customers a similar change. This is one of my favorite graphs ever, where we actually look at the entire customer base of Hoxhunt, had more than 2 million or close to 3 million actually users now. And we see our behaviors change over time in training. And what you can see here is that in red, it's what we call a fail rate. So it's people who click on the phishing emails or phishing simulations or enter the credentials or download an attachment. And yes, it is going down over time. So there you have the months in training. We have data for about 6 years here, 70 months, so about 6 years. And it goes down over time. But it never really got down to zero because we're human and we make mistakes. That's how it is. It will never go down to zero. But in the same time, we see that the success rate, so the number of people who not just ignore the email, but who actually report it to security using the reporting button, increases continuously. After 1 year, it's around 60%, but here, month after month and year after year, it continues to increase more and more to close to 80% reporting rate. And that's, I think, quite remarkable. And not only that, but the last part of this graph that is also interesting are the blue bars. And the blue bars, they're the performance not on phishing simulations, but on real threats that bypass the email filters. And we can see also that month after month, people report more and more real threats. Close to, at the end, around 0.5 real threat reported per user per month. So that shows that we're not just training people, but that we're doing this, what we're doing actually creates a change in behaviors and create a real risk reduction because more attacks are reported to the SOC faster. Now let's look at the last step. And, oh, sorry. So remember, it was measuring and communicating the impact. And that's actually what I just did in the previous 2 slides. I went a little bit ahead, and it's a key step of any human risk management program. Our focus shouldn't be on activities, but on outcomes. What are the outcomes of the program? Are we making a difference? What have we achieved with our intervention? Have we actually changed behaviors and reduced the risk? And these outcome-based metrics are essential, but it's when you wrap them into stories that you will really win hearts and mind. So when I bring them to leadership, I usually use the structure shown on this slide. First, I talk about the risk before. So appeal to both the rational and emotional part of your recipients of the people you talk to. The story allows you to connect emotionally, so you can share an example of an incident that happened in your organization or in an organization similar to yours. And the figures, they prove your point that the story is not just an anecdote, but that it's a real risk or cost for the company. And then once you've painted that landscape of what the risk is, explain what you did, keep it simple, but explain the scope of the experiment and in the big lines what you did, because people in the room might have never heard about it, but keep it simple and short. And then show the results. So it's your time to shine. It's your time to share the impact of your initiative. Same here, use outcome-based metrics and stories. For the metrics, for example, this led to an increase in reporting rate 7-fold in 6 months, or after 3 months, we reduced the usage of unapproved cloud apps like Dropbox by 95%. And for the story, say what people said about these initiatives, how they felt about it, what was the feedback like, or did you catch actually an attack early because of this? And finish with your ask. If the initiative is a success, senior leaders might want to be involved in it. So ask them to be involved in the expansion of this initiative or in the next one that you're planning. As for their sponsorship, from recording a 2-minute video of the CEO or the CFO for an event or a training, having a quote in an intranet article or an email, or asking them to send an email actually to everyone that emphasizes the importance of security or of the next initiative that you're launching. So this is an agenda that you can use for any meeting where you present to top managers. And that's for human risk management. And before we get to the Q&A, so remember we have less than 5 minutes left, basically, so you can ask your questions in the Q&A feature of Teams, and we'll take them after. Let me also tell you about a case study or bring a little bit more knowledge here about what it means, for example, in retail. So retail has very specific challenges, I think. In the stores, people often don't have a company device or they use the shared one. They're in a very different environment, which means that the risks are probably different also. Do they use the same tools, the same services? Do they have access to the same data than the rest of the company? They have less time for training, most likely. They have different priorities. They need to serve customers first, so might have a lot of less time for training. It might be a different culture than in the rest of the organization. Maybe in the stores, it's a lot more top-down than in the office. Yeah, and different priorities, as I said, with serving the customer always comes first. And we see that in the numbers. So these are figures also from Hoxhunt, from the average report miss and click rates that we see in different industries. And as you can see, retail, unfortunately, comes kind of at the bottom when it comes to reporting rate. People are less engaged than in the rest in other industries because they don't use their computer or they don't have one even, or they check their emails once a week or once a month and the simulation has expired by then, right? So a lot of reasons. So what can we do in this type of environment? Well, everything that I talked about before, of course, but how can we improve and make it, better also in retail? I think in this environment, so if you work in retail, think about creating training that is short, as we said before, because there's really not a lot of time. 5 minutes is really the maximum that I think a sales advisor in a store can spend on security at one time. And make it also very relevant to them. So try to not make the same training or the same communication campaign for everyone in the company. But if you address people who work in the store, make sure that they feel that it's for them specifically and not for people who work in an office. So we have also at Hoxhunt specific simulations for people who work in a store and specific training packages for people who work in a store. Use also the relevant communication channels. It might not be the same in the stores and in the rest of the organization. Maybe since it's less digital, maybe you need to have posters in the store. Maybe you need to have make sure that security is mentioned in the team briefing that happens every morning or every evening at the end of the day. Maybe it's more mobile communication, mobile first communications instead of laptops. Also, try to use the store managers as much as possible. They're kind of the interface here, either by making them your champions, creating a network of security champions that are your store managers that can then share the word further. And basically, it's kind of a train the trainer approach where you train them and hopefully they can train after their staff. And I've seen in general, it's quite important to leverage kind of top-down messaging in the stores. It's going to be a lot harder to address people directly. So make sure that you involve the different lines of management. And finally, it's not just about awareness and training and making sure, yes, it's short, it's custom, it's great, but also look at what are the challenges and the pains today when it comes to security. How many times do they have to log in during the day to do what they need to do with the customers? And try to make security as easy as possible, because the easier it is, the less violations of security you'll see. The easier it is, the more people will actually take the right secure behavior. So that's it. Let's look at the conclusion and some key takeaways. As I said, traditional security awareness is kind of flawed. It often fails at effectively changing behaviors and culture because it focuses on knowledge and information alone. So start to apply a human risk management framework in your organization. Start by understanding what are your biggest risks and start there with positive, targeted, and continuous interventions. And once you've made some difference in these biggest risks, make sure to measure what it was in the beginning, do your intervention, measure at the end, and communicate your impact by combining stories and data. Thank you very much. If you want to dive deeper, let's connect. If you're there, here's a QR code to my LinkedIn profile. So feel free to connect with me or follow me on LinkedIn. and happy to to open up our presentation to questions now.
Thank you so much, Maxime. That was so interesting. So we do have the Q&A function if anyone has any questions. And if you don't want to ask them in this space, please do feel free to email me them and I'll get in touch with Maxime. While some of you are thinking of your questions, I do have one for you, Maxime. So if there is sort of one lesson you want someone to take away from this webinar, what would that one lesson be?
One lesson, it's always super tough to choose one thing. But I really think for me, it's the power of data, to be honest, of showing what your outcome is and communicating this. I think it makes such a huge difference. In awareness, people tend to be seen historically as kind of entertainers, oh, you're making like nice communication campaigns and super cool poster, it's beautiful. Yeah, but what's the point? Are you making an impact with that? And when you start to talk to people about risk, you're actually reducing risk and bring data on that and say, this was the risk before, this is what we've done, this is the status today, we've reduced the risk by 80%, right? Your image completely changes, your scope of work completely changes. And I think it's one of the most powerful things that you can do.
That makes a lot of sense. And the way you use your data from the experiment you ran, I found that really impactful. And especially seeing how people are 7 times more likely to report. That's a fantastic example of a successful security awareness sort of campaign. Why is it so important now that we actually start to get people not just not clicking on the emails, but also reporting the emails?
Yeah, I think there's 2 main reasons. The first one is I say we never get down to 0 when it comes to click rate. The right click at the wrong time can catch anyone. That's not from me. That's from Jessica Barker, a great security specialist and influencer. Yeah, if you're really stressed, there's a lot of work, and your kid is crying, and then you open your phone and there's something that seems really urgent, and you just click. It can happen. I'm not blaming anyone for this. So instead of trying to get no one to click, which is not possible, I think we should aim at getting as many people as possible to report, and to report as quickly as possible. It makes a big difference because the truth is that the huge majority of phishing campaigns, they're not sent to one person. They're campaigns, they're sent to a lot of people, at least 10, 20, 50, 100 people at the same time. So if one person reports it quickly, and the SOC the security team or the SOC gets that information about there's a campaign ongoing and, we received it in the organization, then the SOC can take action. They can remove that thread from all the mailboxes. They can block the link. They can block the sender. They can see if anyone has clicked already and make sure that, it doesn't cause any harm. So reporting, in my opinion, is so much more important than the click rate.
That is a fantastic response, and it makes a lot of sense, especially as that kind of goal of click rate of 0 is, it's not achievable. So shifting to your focus to what you can control is incredibly important. And I think we've got time probably for one more question, which I think is always the one that people really want to know the answer to is, what is the biggest mistake that you've seen companies make when trying to drive security behavior change? Because I think it's always helpful to know what you should avoid doing as well.
I don't know if it's the biggest mistake that I've seen, but I'll bring one thing, and I think it's being a bit too strict or punitive or negative about security. That when you tell people what not to do instead of telling them what to do, and you monitor them on that, and you say, oh, you've done the wrong thing, that's bad, don't do it again. It's kind of treating people a bit like children, and it breaks what I said before, this kind of psychological safety that you need in the organization, not only for security, but for the business and for the company to work, to be honest. So we really want to promote psychological safety. And so that's why training should never be punitive. You know, it's not because people click on a phishing simulation that they should get fired, for example. It's just training. We want to train people, and yes, if they do bad things repeatedly and they do it on purpose, then of course you need to treat that. But most people, you know, they want to do the right thing, and it's accidents or mistakes. So let's try to understand where these accidents and mistakes come from and judge kind of the incident and the accident, but not the person.
That makes a lot of sense, and it's really embodied into Hoxhunt, and I think that is really reflected in that the product and how it's not super strict. Actually, it's very fun. I actually do enjoy it when we at Seacon do have Hoxhunt, and I love it when I manage to spot one and I get my stars and I make my way up that leaderboard. So thank you so much for answering that question, and thank you so much for your time today. It's been really insightful, and I hope everyone who's attended has gained something from this session. Oh, actually, is that a notification in the... Sorry, thought a question come in there and I didn't want to... Oh no, there has been a question. Thank you so much, Henry, for that. So quickly, one before we finish up. So Henry's asked, should users who have clicked on a potential phishing link go through the official incident management process before resetting their password, or is it better for them to act immediately and change their credentials?
I mean, in the ideal world, if people think or know that they clicked on the phishing link, yes, it's great if they can immediately change their credentials. That said, I think it's an ideal world. And I think in most cases, people, you know, report without sometimes being sure. And they say, okay, I'm not sure. I clicked on something strange. I gave my password. You know, can you check? And then that's during the incident management process that you tell them, or that you reset the passwords actually yourself if you know that they, you know, it was an incident. So yeah, in the ideal world, of course, if people think that they clicked on a phishing email, they should change their credentials. That said, I think it's a bit of an advanced behavior, and maybe that's not the starting point.
Brilliant. Hopefully that answered your question, Henry, and please do feel free to get in touch if you want some more in-depth or specific like exploration around that. So we'll wrap up now. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending, and I hope you gained something. Thank you so much, Maxime, for this session. It was really insightful and really informative. I hope everyone has a lovely day, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you again at another one of our webinars. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.